There are hundreds of basic and alternate recipes in Satisfactory 1.0. Some of them are absolutely amazing, whilst others not so much. So I've made it my mission in Satisfactory to compare every single recipe in the game to inform you guys on what the best and worst recipes are. So welcome to the best recipes in Satisfactory 1.0 series. Today's video is all about the Ballistic warp drive, a phase 5 space elevator part and the most difficult item to make in the entirety of Satisfactory. And it is produced right here in the manufacturer. Why do I say this is the most difficult item to craft in the game? Well, why don't we take a look. Firstly, you need something called thermal propulsion rockets, which before update 1.0, this was the most difficult item to make, and now you need the addition of singularity cells, superposition oscillators, and dark matter crystals. It is a lot of work. In fact, here's a comparison with our thermal propulsion rocket recipe and a regular motor recipe. Look at the difference in size. That doesn't even include the singularity cells, which also involve nuclear pasta, or these other two items here. And here is that ballistic warp drive recipe in comparison to the nuclear pasta recipe, so it is absolutely gigantic. Also, today we are going to be making 10 of these per minute, and I will say now, as you'll definitely see towards the end of the video, making 10 of these requires a lot of resources, a lot of power, and a lot of machines. So if you only want to make one of these per minute, that's completely fine as well, but yeah, today's example is 10 per minute. Last, to make our 10 ballistic warp drives, we are going to need 400 dark matter crystals, 20 superposition oscillators, 10 thermal propulsion rockets, and lastly, 50 singularity cells, which is where we're going to be starting off today. Everything that you see on screen right now is our singularity cell recipe. Firstly, we are going to need 1000 concrete. Luckily, despite the pretty large number here of concrete, water, and limestone, this is relatively simple to do. We are also going to need iron plates, which is fantastic. It's one of the very first things that you make in Satisfactory, so hopefully we all know how to make this. Moving on to one of the last things you make in Satisfactory, we've got dark matter crystals, an item that's unlocked in phase 5 of the space elevator. For this, we are going to need 250 dark matter residue, which you can actually get for free as a byproduct from anything that you make inside the quantum encoder. But if you're not making anything inside the quantum encoder yet, then this is what you are going to need: 125 reanimated SAM and 500 SAM. We are also going to need time crystals as well, which are made from diamonds. And here I'm using pink diamonds, which uses a lot less coal, but does use a little bit of quartz crystals. Luckily though, I am using the pure quartz crystal recipe, so I'm able to save on a little bit of quartz by adding quite a bit of water. The next part of our 50 singularity cell recipe, and the absolute bulk of this recipe, is our nuclear pasta, where we're going to need 5 of these per minute. The first thing that we are going to need is our 1000 copper powder, which requires 6000 copper ingots, or 2400 copper ore and 1600 water. If you don't want to use pure copper ingots, you are going to need 6000 copper ore, so I'm able to save a bunch of natural or raw resources, which is fantastic. The next thing that we are going to need is our pressure conversion cube, which requires an additional 2 items here. Starting off with our radio control units, we are going to need 10 of these per minute, where again we are using pure quartz crystal, the exact same recipe like what I showed just over there. So luckily that isn't too bad. In addition to that, we are going to need 20 high-speed connectors. The first part of our high-speed connector recipe is our 20 circuit boards, where I'm using the recipe that doesn't involve any crude oil. I'm using steamed copper sheets, pure copper ingots, and just our regular silica recipe. This way I can try and save a decent amount of copper, and again I'm using 0 crude oil. The next part of our recipe is our 1120 quick wire, where again I'm using this recipe here, which involves copper and caterium rather than just caterium, and then using pure caterium ingots and pure copper ingots. This saves me on an absolute load of caterium, which I absolutely love. And lastly, we've got our cable recipe, where I'm using our iron wire. This way I don't use any copper here. You can just use the regular copper recipe, that's completely fine, but I'm trying to go for a mega iron factory build, hence why I've gone with this. But either way, that is the first part of our radio control unit recipe. The final part is our heat sinks, where again we're using our same copper sheet recipe that I've already been through, and here is my aluminium recipe, a recipe which is most likely going to be coming up quite a lot in today's video. So I'm using a sloppy solution over here, which deals with 0 silica. The reason for that is because I don't want to use any silica when making our aluminium ingots. We also get a good amount of water and a good amount of polymer resin, which you can turn into fiber or you can even turn to plastic if you so wish, or I think rubber as well. Regardless, it's pretty good, and of course you have to use it. If you don't want to use it or turn it into anything, you could always just sink it. So that's our radio control unit recipe. Now it's time to move on to our fused modular frame recipe, where the very first thing that we are going to need is our heavy modular frame. Starting off with concrete, steel pipe, in which I am using the iron pipe recipe alternate because I absolutely love it. We are then going to need the encased industrial pipe or encased industrial beam recipe, but it's the encased industrial pipe alternate, which uses steel pipes and concrete. Finally, we are going to need our modular frames, which we are using our stitched iron plates combined with those iron pipes, so the only resource we are consuming down there is iron. I absolutely love this heavy modular frame recipe because it only uses limestone, iron, and water if you so wish. It makes the logistics part of it nice and simple. Here we've got some more aluminium products, and I'm not going to go through it again because it's the exact same aluminium setup, but with a little bit of copper ingots. And the last thing that we are going to need for our fused modular frame is 125 nitrogen gas. And everything that we just went through right there is our 50 singularity cells. Again, I do go through it a lot slower on my main singularity cell video, but we've got a lot to get through today, so I don't want to spend too long talking about that. Especially considering that the next item that we have to try to mention is our thermal propulsion rocket, and this thing is absolutely giga. It goes from all of there, all the way to roughly here, so it's a pretty big chunk of today's recipe, but let's go through it. First thing that we need is 25 modular engines. This will only be consuming iron, water, and crude oil because of the way I've laid everything out. Starting with our motor recipe, we are consuming iron pipes, iron wire, iron pipes, iron wire. Obviously, it just consumes iron, so that's absolutely fantastic. Moving on now to our rubber recipe, where I'm using this alternate, which consumes plastic and fuel, preferably diluted fuel, and you can get the heavy oil residue as a byproduct from the plastic when you make that from crude oil. The only other thing that you need now is a little bit of water, so essentially crude oil and water to make your rubber. Pretty simple stuff there. Moving on now to our smart plating, where again the only thing that we are going to need is iron, crude oil, and water, which is pretty handy, isn't it? And for our plastic recipe, I'm using the exact same recipe layout as our rubber, but rather than using plastic and fuel to make our rubber, it's now rubber and fuel to make our plastic. So that is a pretty simple way of making that. The second thing that we are now going to need is cooling systems. To make our 30 cooling systems, we are going to need 60 heat sinks. And again, this is our aluminium setup. We're also going to need 15 motors, which I've already gone through, and lastly, 360 nitrogen gas. We're also going to need an additional 10 fused modular frames, and I've already gone through the fused modular frame recipe, luckily, so we don't have to go over this again. The last item that we are going to need, which consumes everything right here, is our 10 turbo motors, an item that's pretty notorious for being a quite difficult and quite tricky item to make, but I think when you break it down it makes things a lot easier. Starting off with our motors, which I've already gone through, and our 40 stators, which I've sort of already gone through here in our motor recipe. Neither of these recipes are too bad logistically because they only require iron, which is pretty nice. Next we are going to need, oh, what is that? Fused modular frames. That's the third time now that we are using fused modular frames for this one recipe, where again we are using heavy modular frames over there, an aluminium casing recipe over there with a little bit of nitrogen gas. This isn't too bad, especially if you've already got like an iron factory and an aluminium factory set up. The only other thing that you're now going to need is your nitrogen gas, which again luckily isn't too bad. And the final thing that we are going to need for our pressure conversion cubes in order to make our turbo motors is our 10 radio control units, which again, we've already gone through. The reason as to why this recipe might sound very familiar is again because we are needing 5 pressure conversion cubes. And what do we need to make our 5 nuclear pasta? 5 pressure conversion cubes. So it's the exact same part of the recipe, just copied over here, then pasted somewhere over there. So it's probably a lot easier to make, like, let's say 10 pressure conversion cubes and split it 50-50. Or what you could do, and I kind of do recommend this, is make your 5 pressure conversion cubes, then summer sloop it. That way you can make your 10 pressure conversion cubes with the price of only 5 pressure conversion cubes, which is pretty cool. Or an even better strategy to do with your I think it's like 4 summer sloops in the end, is when you're making your ballistic warp drives, you might only want to make 5 of them per minute. Add in your 4 summer sloops and there you go, you've got yourselves 10 ballistic warp drives for the cost of only 5. or you can make 20 ballistic warp drives for the cost of only 10. Regardless, that's another fun strat that you guys can play around with. Going back to our turbo motors, the final thing that we are going to need is our packaged nitrogen gas, which again is the exact same aluminium setup that I've done before, except this time we're making empty fluid tanks, and we're going to need a little bit of nitrogen gas, but that's about it. Again, I have made an entire video covering the thermal propulsion rocket, so if you'd like a further in-depth video about that, then feel free to check out the video on screen. But now let's go to the very final part of our recipe, the superposition oscillator. We've got one other thing after that though, but it's nice and simple to talk about, since we've already gone through it. So we are going to need 180 alclad aluminium sheets. Again, this is our aluminium recipe. We've already seen this a few times today. We are also going to need crystal oscillators, where this is going to require our pure quartz crystal, our cable, which again we are using from iron wire, but regular wire is completely fine as well, and our stitched reinforced iron plates, another recipe that I absolutely love. We are also going to need 120 dark matter crystal, which luckily isn't too complex to make. The only annoying thing is actually trying to make the items itself. Because, for example, to make our dark matter crystals and our time crystals and our diamonds, all involve things like the converter or particle accelerators, which power-wise costs a lot. And especially the particle accelerator, it's a very big machine as well. So actually making this thing resource-wise isn't dreadful, but overall the process can be a little bit daunting, but don't worry though. The final thing that we are going to need now is our 500 excited photonic matter in order to make our 20 superposition oscillator. And lastly, the very final thing for the entire recipe now is our 400 dark matter crystal. I've literally just talked about this recipe a second ago, and we mentioned it a little bit earlier as well. But look at the amount of resources that we're going to need here. 2000 SAM, 3200 coal, 1550 raw quartz, and 858 water. This is a lot of resources, but luckily if you are producing a bunch of dark matter residue as a byproduct, you are going to save yourself 2000 SAM per minute, which is a lot of SAM considering there's only about like 10k in the entire world, so that's huge. And again, I've got a dedicated video talking about the superposition oscillator as well, if you guys would like to give that a view. Regardless though, that is our ballistic warp drives, but we are not done there just yet, since now it's time to break down the resources required, machine required, and the total power required as well. And just like I said towards the very start of today's video, 10 ballistic warp drives is a lot, so if you only want to make one per minute, just divide everything here by 10, that's completely fine. But let's begin with water, where we are going to need 12,711.8 water per minute, 3,231 raw quartz, 4,960 coal, 3,100 SAM, 500 excited photonic matter, 6,188 iron, 3,387 copper, 2,340 bauxite, 574.25 crude oil per minute, 2,244 limestone, 380 deuterium, and lastly, 1,250 nitrogen gas. My main concern here with all of this is the amount of water that we are going to need. This, I believe, is over 100 water extractors, so that is quite a lot. Everything else here, again, it's quite a lot. 3,000 SAM's quite a bit, but all of that, I believe, is coming from our dark matter residue, which in theory you can get for free as a byproduct from other machines. So it's quite a lot. It could be a lot less, though. Everything else, it is what it is. It's quite a lot of resources, but like I'm going to say yet again, you are making 10 ballistic warp drives, the most difficult item to make in the entire game, so do expect this to be quite a lot. But now let's move over to the machines required. And things here are just as crazy, if not even crazier, because we are going to need 24 particle accelerators, consuming an average of 20,370 megawatts, to a maximum of 30,500 megawatts. In case you don't know, the particle accelerators and the converters as well as the quantum encoders all have fluctuating power, so it doesn't just consume X amount of power, it consumes anything from X to Y amount of power, which is quite annoying to calculate, so I've done the average and the maximum for you guys as well, just to try and make it a bit easier to understand. We are also going to need, and this is just berserk, 120 converters, consuming an average of 27,840 megawatts to a maximum of 44,000 515 megawatts. Just these two items themselves is over 70,000 megawatts for maximum consumption. That is ridiculous. But even if you were just to make one, that's still 7,000 megawatts for the very first two machines. Alas, I digress. 108 manufacturers will set you back 5,272 megawatts. 25 blenders will set you back 1,619 megawatts. 250 assemblers is 3,537 megawatts. 2 packages at 20 megawatts. Wow, okay, an actual normal number. That's quite nice to see. 626 refineries will then set you back 15,557.5 megawatts. You can't really have 0.5 there, so just round it up. That might make things a bit easier. 450, well, you can. It's just, again, making things a bit easier. Just round it up. 453 constructors consuming 1,736 megawatts. And lastly, 76 smelters consuming 300 megawatts. Now let's assess the total damage. And that comes out to 103,056.5 megawatts worth of power needed to make your 10 ballistic warp drives, or 10,305.7 megawatts worth of power for one ballistic warp drive, which is still an absolutely insane amount of power, and I don't believe that even includes the water extractors, so that's probably like an extra couple thousand megawatts added on there as well, so we are dealing with a lot of power here. I absolutely hate this recipe. There's no easier way of saying it. I absolutely despise this recipe, but because of how big it is, one thing that we can notice here is that we are consuming a lot of very similar items. For example, 5 pressure conversion cubes over there. We're then consuming 5 pressure conversion cubes over here as well, which means that everything from, let's see here, from here is all the exact same items that we are consuming over here. So it's not really that bad when you try and spot the similarities, but regardless, it is still a lot of items to consume. And again, something else that also pops up quite a lot here as well is our dark matter crystals. If you make these all in bulk, it might make things a bit easier there as well. We've got tons of iron products, tons of concrete products. So the easiest way to tackle this absolute behemoth of a recipe is just by doing little bits at a time. Start off with like a very small iron factory, then maybe an aluminium factory, then maybe something for your electronics or your pressure conversion cubes, then start to combine it that way. If you were to do everything here all at once, you would be in an absolute state of disbelief from start to finish, and truth be told, that's not fun. Bear in mind, we are playing a video game here. We're trying to have a bit of fun, and also trying to make things nice and efficient and enjoyable as well. So I do recommend breaking things down here a little bit. Like again, for example, motors, make that in your iron factory. Stators, make that in your iron factory. Even your heavy modular frames, you can also make this in your iron factory. Import a little bit of concrete, and that is it. That's pretty fun to make over there as well. Aluminium factory, I don't know, electronics factory for these lots, iron factory. So again, like, you can break this down to smaller recipes, which you might have to do because hopefully it will make things a bit easier for you guys. But do let me know in the comments down below, have you made this? And most importantly, have you enjoyed it? I have dozens of videos just like this on the channel with loads more to come, so if you enjoyed it, feel free to like, feel free to subscribe. You don't have to, but it supports the channel. But regardless, thank you very much for watching, liking and subscribing, and I'll see you on the next video. Goodbye.